Hello, Mike. It's Brad Howard calling. And listen, I read your story about the Ferrari Dino. Quite interesting. Just want to let you know that you had it pretty good up until the point that the car was stolen. And of course, it's my car, and I've had this car since 1978. I've had it ever since it pretty much almost came out of the ground. And it's in awesome shape. Let me know if you want to see it. I'm in the LA area, and I'd be more than happy to get you straight there.
Obviously, I got it before I was married, so I was like any other male.
It was just one of those stories that came out of just web surfing. Sometimes a Jalopnik story will just come out of one photograph. One day I just happened to be surfing around on Tumblr. Just a black and white photo popped up on somebody's Tumblr page. It was a Dino that was being pulled out of the ground, and it was just a really compelling photo. I had never heard of a story of a Dino being unearthed, anywhere before. Luckily, we live in the age of Google, and it took, obviously almost nothing. I just started Googling buried Dino, and I found the original story that ran in the LA Times about how some kids had been playing in a yard in a house in South Central or nearby South Central.
And the tat-tat heard something, kind of unearthed it, and got the police involved. The little story behind the car is that it was purchased in 1974 from Hollywood Sports Car. The guy had bought it for his wife's birthday. They had it for about a week, a little over a week, and decided to take a nice dinner outing to the Brown Derby restaurant. And lo and behold, when they came out from dinner, they had no car. It was gone. So this mysterious car disappeared and did not surface until early 1978.
The first time I saw the car, it actually looked like it had chicken pox all over it. Little circles all over the car, all over the paint.
The assumption was that there was a swimming pool, that it was dried out or whatever, and they had ramped it, and they had pulled the car into a swimming pool. They had wrapped it in plastic. They put they put towels inside to absorb certain areas to take the moisture away, hoping to preserve the car, protect it from the elements.
I had to pull all the rugging off of it. We were concerned there was a victim. In fact, I had to go down to the side of the car, open up and check inside, and we checked the trunk, because if there had been a body, we would have to stop our investigation, call homicide, and they would have taken over the total investigation. That same day, we got approximately 40 or 50 calls wanting to buy the car from us.
That story had kind of been and gone. I thought it would make a pretty good post, just sort of a random kind of cool car culture post on Jalopnik. So I wrote it up, found a few articles about it that had been written, just wrote it up straight, as much information as we could find, and figured, yeah, that was that. That was a good post for for whatever day it was, and that was it, and moved on. Kind of to my surprise, it ended up becoming a pretty big, well-read story. So next thing you know, I get a call from a guy who says he owns the car. And I'm thinking, owns the car? You mean, like, nobody had been able to find the Dino before? I guess nobody had really looked real hard, because, it really would have taken a couple of phone calls. It had been registered with the Dino Club and the Ferrari Club and all that stuff. So people knew that Brad Howard had a Dino, and I think they probably knew, since his license plate said dug up, that it was that Dino that was dug up in LA in 1978. I was like, yeah, I think we have to come out and meet this guy and check out this car.
In 1978, early part of 78, I was doing a real estate transaction over on La Cienega with a client named Ara Manugian, about ready to get into negotiations, and he gets a phone call and starts arguing with somebody. Gets off the phone. Turns out he was arguing with his partner, who had just come by a 1974 Dino that they had bought from a insurance auction, and found out a little about the car at that time. And I said, gee whiz, I'll buy it from you. And he goes, you don't want this car. It's been underground. And I says, nah, that sounds like my style. I was actually thinking about Dino Ferraris at the time, only as a passing, because, you know, they were kind of a hot item back in the 70s. And this one came up, and at that time, I know it sounds really ridiculously expensive, but in '78 it was in a price range, and I said, okay, fine, I can deal with that. And I just said, oh, okay, I'll do that. And I forgot what they were going for back then, and they're probably maybe 23, 24, something like that. And this one, I picked it up for less than that. Immediately got the dug-up plates that year. My interest in the car was that if you go back and look at time and weather, from 1974 to 1978 was a drought, a very big drought in Los Angeles. So my brain quickly figured that, gee whiz, this thing's underground, there's not going to be a lot of moisture, and if they took halfway decent care of it, maybe there's a shot. My theory was pretty correct. Part of when I bought the car, not knowing a lot about the Ferraris, and I was mostly a Jaguar person, and I'd asked Ara, I said, Ara, one of the things, this thing's got to run. I mean, I want this thing to run and run right to get it. That, I can take care of the paint and I can get the car looking good, but it's got to run. So at that point, Ara ran into Giuseppe, and Giuseppe ended up taking the car to his garage and went through the engine. He pulled it down. He was going through to make sure it was oiled right, to make sure all the parts were in good shape, the thing was dialed in, everything was working. And that's the way I got it back from him in 1978. And outside of oil changes and one water pump, it's still the same engine.
Tried to start, the car didn't start. We checked compression, of course there was very little compression, which we figured that probably the rings were stuck or something had happened, we don't know. So that's when we took the engine apart, and sure enough, all the rings were stuck together. We replaced 3 pistons, and of course all the rings. I did like a minor engine overall. Refreshed the rod bearings and main bearings, and did a nice valve job, and put it together, and the car ran good. Ara was a little bit, how can I say, economical. He didn't want to put too much money on the car, so he could not afford to have the car done at the dealer. And me working out of my garage at home, as part-time too, because I was working at the time, I could practically do it for 1/3 of the price that the dealer would have. Supposedly I worked on the car when it was new. I cannot confirm that or deny it.
The key to the car was getting a good painter, and I was very fortunate there. And Paul used to work for a guy named Benito, and it was AFM Auto, I believe. And rather than go through Benito directly, I got Paul on the side. He took the car to his garage in Los Feliz, and it spent, I would say, no kidding, there was at least close to 3 weeks to a month on the body. He would take it in small sections, probably about this big, and he would take it and he'd buff it down to the steel to get nice and clean. Then he'd throw a coat over it. And he did the entire car that way, all the way around. There was no Bondo used in the car whatsoever. Anything, if it was heat treated, they would heat treat the metal because of the aluminum. So any damaged areas were very carefully brought back to Ferrari standards for a brand new car. As you see the car now, that was painted in 1978. It has not been touched since. The forest green paint that was put on the outside, the formula was gotten directly from factory from Ferrari. And if you were to take the door panels off and see the inside, you'd see a total match between the exterior and the interior. The interior being the original and the exterior being the painting, which was done in 1978. I'd actually taken it to many different mechanics that I had that would work on getting the oil changed and so forth. were absolutely shocked at the fact and the condition the car was in compared to a lot of cars that have been on the road. It did not, it did not receive the amount of damage that you would have gotten from smog. But I guess, life's changed now. We don't have the same ozone action going on. We don't have the same amount of smog that we had. So as it got better in the 70s and 80s, this car kind of skipped a lot of that from its being underground. And of course, when I drove it, I did not drive it all the time, so it was always kept in a garage and or undercover. Of most recent, the interior I did in June of last year. Prior to that, I did do a liner around the seat, just the outside liner, because I had a girlfriend that didn't know how to get in and out of the car. She kind of dropped her butt down. She split it right at the corner. But outside of that, it was all original. And the biggest problem is the foam that they used back then, after time, just disintegrates. And it got to the point where all the stitching was there, everything, you could see everything, but there was just no substance behind the car, and it was very uncomfortable to drive. And so I said, that's it, I'm going to have to do something. So I went ahead and we got all the original material and redid the interior. Bumpers, we buffed them out. The front grille is all original, all the lighting around the side. I think one of these taillights, which was interesting back in the day, those were actually done by Fiat at the time. It was before Fiat really started the Fiat line, but they were the same basic side lamps, and I ended up replacing one of those. As time went on, discovering the car, it turns out that this is a 1974 Chairs and Flares. It's a very rare car. I believe it's only in the last year of '74 did they do the Chairs and Flare version, which was a California special car, primarily built for the California market. On the fender wells, you'll see that the fenders have a little bit of a flare on the outside. That is part of the flare that they threw on the '74 GTS version of the Chairs and Flares. The Chairs is basically the Daytona package. When you went and got a Daytona, you had a certain type of chair, interior, motif. That was completely put into the car as part of that model. Now, I guess people could upgrade their Dinos to that, but it would clearly be an update or an add-on at the time, but this came stock this way. A lot of people afterwards would ship them in from Europe, and then they have to go through all these conversions and so forth. This car is clearly a California registered car. Therefore, it had all the smog for California on it. It had air conditioning, had all the modern conveniences of the Hollywoodites, power windows and all the goodies for the day. A lot of people noticed the wheels on it, and they said, well, gee, where did these come from? And I said, well, this is what came with the car. They're only on the Dino 246. If you read it, it says Dino right on it. There are very few of these wheels available. They were only given as a package for the Daytona Chairs and Flare package at that time, which I bought, I think, the last 3 that they had in Florida at the main factory rep, which was a good thing. I had no idea at the time, considering they were in 1978. I think they cost me $555 a piece. I thought that was pretty stiff, but what do you know? I wouldn't want to buy them today. In a picture, you'll see when it came out of the ground, and I don't know who did it, but somebody had actually torched out the Dino GT insignia, and rather than just popping the 2 pins and taking it on, they actually cut a hole out, which you can clearly see in the picture. We obviously had to metal that back in again before it was painted, and then I had to put the Dino sticker back on. Well, since it didn't come with one, I chose to put mine on a little differently than what's out there, but I thought it looked better. I've always liked the Dino. It's small. It's very maneuverable. I like the go-kart feeling. It's, it's one thing to go 200 miles an hour, but you can never find a place to really do that legally, not even close to. At least the Dino, you can get the performance out of it. It's just an amazing handling car. I love the looks. I just like the humpy fenders. I like it's just a stylish, very stylish. It's very unique. It's not, flat, torpedo looking. It kind of has, I guess the best way, when the car is sitting there, it looks like it's moving. It's a fun car. I don't have a lot of cars, but I have fun cars.
So after Brad got in touch with me, I wanted to track down the other players in the Ferrari Dino story. Unfortunately, I found out that Joe Sabis, one of the detectives, passed away in 2005. And I had a suspicion that the LA Times had gotten the other detective's name wrong. Lenny Carroll, right, was the name in the LA Times piece. I couldn't find any record of any Lenny Carroll ever having been, or Leonard Carroll or anything like that, had ever been a sheriff's deputy in LA County. I just kind of had a suspicion that it was Dennis instead of Lenny, like it would have been Denny Carroll. And so I found an organization that represents retired sheriff's deputies, and sure enough, his name was Dennis Carroll.
My name is Dennis Carroll, DennisCarroll. Unlike the newspaper article, kids in the neighborhood didn't contact us. My partner and I, Joe Sabis, so we had an informant. And the informant led us to the address, and we weren't sure about it. It sounded silly that anybody would bury a car, especially a Ferrari. Well, he was a heroin addict, I remember that. And we went by it. He said, that's the house. The car is buried back there in the backyard. We took him and released him and came back the next day and went to the house and knocked on the door. And there was tenants there, and they gave us permission to go check in the backyard. And after a few pokes in the ground, whatever, there was something hard metal-wise. And so that's when we stopped and called for assistance to help dig up the hole. Well, what he said was the owner wanted to collect insurance on the car, and he asked these guys to take the car, dismantle it, destroy it, get rid of all the evidence. But when they took it home, they liked the car so much, they decided to keep it and bury it rather than destroy it. Once we found the car, then his whole story became kind of credible.
It's like the huntsman in Snow White, right? The huntsman couldn't land the dagger. These guys couldn't land the chainsaw. They just fell such in love with it, those curves and that, you know, that the flared fenders and the beautiful green paint. They just loved it so much that they couldn't kill it. And so they buried it. They did torch out the Dino badge, and maybe that was their claim check. They were going to come back and get it, but they never did. When it came down to it, they couldn't do it. They just couldn't kill it. It's beautiful. I mean, could you cut it up?
This was about 1983. We left Burbank, we're going on Coldwater Canyon, and somebody in a Camaro Z28 was in front of us doing about 20 miles an hour, 15 or 20 miles an hour. So I thought he was looking for, you know, an address or whatever. My wife's sister behind us, they were in a Turbo Carrera, and we were just cruising, and I decided, well, I don't want to go 15, 20 miles an hour up the hill, so I decided to pull out around him. And lo and behold, as I pull out around him, he thinks he's got a lot of horses, and so he hits it to the floor. The next thing I know is we're coming up to the very first turn there, which is pretty sharp, and we're side by side coming around that turn. When you come around that turn, you can actually see another turn coming up where there's garages, and I saw lights on the garage, which mean opposite traffic was coming. And at that point, I was going pretty damn fast. And so I had no choice but to either back off, which I had a Carrera right behind me doing the same thing, or just go for it. Slammed it in second gear, hit it to the floor, made a cut for line right, cut him off at the corner. I never saw the car coming the other way, obviously made it, and all I remember is trying to make every corner all the way to the top of the hill. I had no idea that the handling capability of the car was what it was, but when I got to the top of the hill on Mulholland, I remember pulling off to the edge, and literally my feet, my hands, I was just shaking. And it absolutely blew me away. The car will outdrive you. You cannot outdrive this car. Amazing car. My wife said explicits.
We couldn't identify the actual thieves who took the car in the first place and buried it. So if you don't have the thieves that did that, you can't even get them back to the owner of the car.
When I talked to Dennis Carroll later on, he was like, I asked him, you know, what do you remember about this case? He said, well, I remember a lot of the attention around it, but to be honest, I've seen every riot in LA history. He goes, it was just a car. I was like, just a car. I guess, you know, compared to a riot, you know, it's not that memorable.
I was on the force 35 years. Throughout my career, I was involved in several things. I was in every riot prior to '95. I was on the corner when the riot started in 1965, watching everybody go crazy. I worked as Manson trial twice, the Manson people, you name it, and I pretty much was involved in most happenings in the Sheriff's Department during that time. Malibu fires, I can go on and go on.